Hey guys! Tonight's recipe is super exciting for me. It's a healthy, low calorie, if that's your jam, vegetable soup, and it's a new to me recipe. I can't wait to make it, partly because it uses a lot of produce from the garden, and I was gifted an abundance of zucchini, and it is going to use up a good bit of that. But since it's a soup recipe, I decided to go ahead and make a loaf of bread, and I make the beer bread. It's 3 ingredients. It couldn't be easier. This is my husband's favorite bread. It's the most requested bread in the family, but it also is going to serve 2 purposes, because yes, I'm going to serve it tonight, but tomorrow for lunch, him and I will be slicing up our 1-pound black brandy wine, and we'll be making our first tomato sandwich of the season. So in order to have that first tomato sandwich, I have to make a loaf of bread. So this recipe is so simple. It's literally 3 ingredients if you use self-rising flour. You can make it with all-purpose flour. You just have to add in, I think, a little bit of salt and baking powder. I will link the original recipe down below. I always go the route of the self-rising flour just to keep it super simple. So first, I am just going to go ahead, and I apologize if you guys hear my dishwasher in the background. But busy mom life, gotta get things done. So went ahead and greased a regular 9x5 loaf pan. And I'm going to need 3 cups of this flour. 3 cups of flour no matter which kind you use. And again, I will sift it. I don't find you really need to with self-rising flour. I've never had a need to do it with the self-rising flour. I do it as an extra step because I had read a couple of reviews that said if you didn't sift, it was a tough bread or hard. I've made this recipe so many times, I have never, ever had an issue with it turning out. So what I have here, I have 3 cups of self-rising flour. If you're going to use all-purpose, I do recommend that you sift it. I sifted this, but you really don't need to, and I feel it ends up making more of a mess. Quarter cup of sugar. See that? Just going to mix that real quick to incorporate it. And then 12 ounces of beer. Neither myself or my husband are beer drinkers, but I make this recipe so often that I keep a 6-pack in the house. I went ahead and measured it out just because I was pretty confident it was 12 ounces. But sometimes I've bought individual beers that are different amounts. Wanted to make sure. And then you just mix your beer in with your dry ingredients and it will come together. You could probably do this in a mixer with a dough hook and it would come together with less arm muscle needed. I just mix until all the flour is mixed with the beer. Sometimes I'll just go in with my hands, just depends on the day. Every time I make this bread, I swear I'm going to take out my KitchenAid stand mixer. And every time I make it, I'm too lazy to do that. Now that it's come together, you don't have to let this sit or anything. I just can't say enough good things about this recipe. It's really this easy. Plop it in there. You can attempt to make her look pretty. Oh, and I wanted to say, I've added shredded cheese to this before. Shredded Swiss was really good, shredded cheddar. You can certainly do that if you want a little extra something, or herbs would be really nice in here. And once I'm done with that, I'll clean my hands. Now we're just gonna take our melted butter, pour it on top. I used a 1/2 cup of butter, a whole stick. The recipe does say you could do less, but Because tonight's dinner is already a really low calorie soup, I'm okay with the extra butter. And into the oven she goes. So this bakes for about an hour, 375. Now that that's in the oven, it's time to go out to the backyard grocery store and grab us some produce for that vegetable soup. And here I'm just pulling some of my carrots. I'm not sure what variety this is, but they don't grow long and skinny like I'm used to. It's more of a shorter, squattier carrot. And much to my surprise, my celery is still producing, so we will grab some of that as well. Now the recipe calls for dried thyme, but I have fresh thyme, so that's what I'm gonna use. Not too bad of a harvest. This guy fell off accidentally in my hydroponic system, so he's gonna go in the soup too. Tonight's dinner, you can see this soup is going to use up a lot of produce. And if you are growing a lot of produce, this is the type of recipe that I really enjoy. These did not come from my yard because I don't have red peppers yet. And if I was just making this recipe any old time, I would have just subbed out for the green bell peppers in my yard. But because it's my first time making this recipe, I decided to stick with the original flavor profile because I know red peppers are a little bit sweeter. I will have the original recipe linked below with all of the measurements. I know it calls for about 600 grams of cauliflower, which I have here, 2 pounds of zucchini, 2 red peppers. It calls for 2 onions, but because mine are a little shy, I'm going with 3. It calls for some veggie broth, 2 large carrots, again, because my carrots are not the best size. I went ahead and supplemented with 2 extra from my fridge. And then 3 stalks of celery, which you saw me harvest out of the yard. So this recipe has 2 parts. The first part is making the base of the soup. The base is made from vegetables. So some of these vegetables are gonna be cooked and then blended, and then the other vegetables will be chopped and eaten in the soup. I hope that didn't come across as confusing as it sounded in my head just now. Real life mama drama here. Does anybody else have a favorite pot that they use or like to use when they're making soups? I literally just went and stole this out of the dishwasher. It's not even dry yet, just so I can get this soup started. It's a bit ridiculous. I own other pots, but it's my favorite soup pot. So we're gonna get started with making the base first. And it actually says to save a little bit of cauliflower off to the side for the actual soup, and the rest is gonna go in the pot to create the base. So now this base is going to be blended, so it's okay if things aren't super finely chopped or everything. But since there is so much chopping in this recipe, I did pull out my chopper. This worked as quick as possible. And as always, I've got my pre-composter at the ready. Just check and make sure there's no big seeds in here. If there are any questionable seeds, I would just go ahead and get that out of there. Since I chopped it up so finely, I'm actually going to just put that on my plate off to the side here and save that for the actual soup, because it just dawned on me that it would be easier for me to transfer larger chunks of zucchini from this pot into the blender rather than having to fish out all those diced pieces. So we're going to work smarter, not harder. Now also to the broth mixture, I'm gonna add in an onion, and I'll probably do an onion and a half since these are small. And again, I'm leaving them large pieces. It'll be easier to fish out and put into the blender. Now the recipe does call for whole garlic cloves. Add in what I feel my soul wants to see. And to that, we're gonna add in our broth and our water. So I need 2 cups of water and 2 cups of broth. You could use vegetable or chicken. I'm doing vegetable. I'm gonna go ahead, add that to my pot. I'm gonna get this cooking on the stove. So full disclosure, it doesn't look like there's enough liquid in the pot. So now that that's on the stove cooking, I'm gonna go ahead and prep the rest of the vegetables for the soup base. Now, of course, you can cook your celery leaves. I am not, because I am saving them. I want to make a homemade bone broth. And I've got a bag of veggie greens. I'm gonna save my carrot greens also for the same point. Now my celery's a little thin, probably too thin for my chopper. So I'm just gonna go in and just chop it myself. Fun fact, after I had COVID back in 2020, I had it right when it came out in March, could not stand the smell of celery. It smelled like ammonia. If you've ever smelled ammonia, it smelled like pure ammonia. And even just having it in the fridge, if I walked by the fridge, I could tell it was in the house. And that lasted for quite a while. Now I'm happy to say celery smells like celery again. Okay, so I've grown celery in my yard before, but this is the first time I've ever grown it. And it tastes really salty. I was a little caught off guard. I actually went and Googled it because I wanted to make sure that this would be okay. Never had it be that salty before. And you know what? My bread is done. And because I'm a little bit anal about certain things, I do like to make sure my bread is cooked. I mean, it looks cooked. I like to make sure my center is cooked, and I believe it's around 200 degrees is considered, it's close. There it is. So I went ahead and made an executive decision about my celery. Because it's so salty, I went ahead and put it in the pot that's boiling to make the broth so that it will kind of hopefully mellow it out. I am going to add milk to this. Figure I can play with the ratios if it ends up being one way or the other too much of something. Ooh, that smells hot. I may leave it whole. Ooh, that is really spicy. Okay, on second thought, I tasted this fella, and he is super spicy. So, because my husband can't tolerate heat the way I can, I'm actually gonna just chop that up as a garnishment from my own personal bowl of soup. And I will not torture him with that, because she is a little bit on the hot side. So now my pre-composter is full. All that after just one meal. One meal's worth of prep. Pretty much run that thing every day. And by the time my veggies are done boiling on the stove to make the base, the bread will be ready to be flipped out onto a wire rack. So I've got about 6 minutes left, and then I'll be ready to work on the base. I should say, now that we heard the timer go off, it's time to blend up the base ingredients in our blender. If you notice off to the side, I still have this many zucchinis left after I've been cooking with them all week. So spam me with your recipes if you have them. I'm willing to try anything. Now obviously this is going to be very hot, so when you blend it, you're probably going to want to hold a towel down on top. Try to get as much of this as possible in here. It's at this point when I realized my blender was really small and I was going to be doing this in batches. Overfilled my poor blender, and she said no. And it squirted all over the floor and all over my tripod. So that's unfortunate. I'm going to dump what I have in here. And this is pretty warm. And it's still not as silky smooth as I would have hoped. So in true busy mom fashion, I made the base of the soup, and then I had to leave to go pick up my youngest son, and now we're going to combine all of the elements together. So to a pot, you need to add a tablespoon of olive oil, and then all of your chopped veggies to saute them until they are softened. So now that all of the vegetables are soft, and I'm just checking to make sure my cauliflower is cooked enough for my liking, you're going to go ahead and add your base that we made earlier to the pot, and then you can thin out your broth if it's not thin enough or a consistency that you like. You can either add more water, milk, or broth. I would personally stick with either broth or milk just for extra flavor. And then you're just gonna stir it all together and let it simmer until your vegetables are cooked through or to a consistency that you like. And since I'm using fresh thyme, I always just lay it on top to simmer. That way it's easier to remove it when it's time to serve. So a little bit of real life talk here. Tonight's dinner would not be what I would describe as quick and easy. And you can see why, I'm sure. But there is a way, well, that's why I'm sitting out here having a little bit of strawberry margarita, enjoying my evening now that that's behind me. I must have cleaned the kitchen 3 times. Anyway, I like this soup because it is healthy. It's very healthy, and it uses a lot of fresh produce from the garden, which is what my goal is this year. That's what I'm trying to do. However, to make this weeknight friendly, because it was not, I would prep it all on the weekend if you can. Get your stuff, prep it, go from there, and throw together all the components on the night you want to make it, and then it's fine. Now, I did end up using the rest of the 2 cups of vegetable broth that it didn't call for. It only called for 2. I bought 4. I ended up using those extra 2 just to get it to a consistency that I liked rather than using water. The other thing, though, that I will say is this. The recipe stated to use your blender for a smoother consistency. I have an older blender, and I did not find I got that smooth consistency. It was not worth the trouble. If I make this again, which I probably will, depending on how much produce I have to use up, I would just use my stick blender. I have an immersion blender right in the pot. You know, it claims you wouldn't get the creamy, smooth texture without using the blender. Well, I went through the trouble of using the blender, dirtying the blender. Now I have to clean the blender, and I didn't get any texture different than what I would have gotten if I would just use my stick blender or my immersion blender. So, all that being said, full disclosure, not gonna steer you wrong, it is a really healthy option. It's a very low calorie option if you are on like a weight loss journey, and it's something that could easily be meal prepped if that's the lifestyle that you're living. Didn't come together as quickly as I would have liked it to. Now the cicada's out. Thank you for hanging out with me. As always, be blessed. The best part of summer, that first tomato sandwich. That's our 1 pound black brandy wine. Homemade bread, a little bit of mayo, salt and pepper. Nothing beats it.